everybody. I'm Dr. Matt Stranick here with you with the esteemed and excellent Dr. Doug Reed, my colleague over here.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, we're within 2 weeks of the holiday period, and we've resolved amongst ourselves, primarily Doug, he's given me the work order here that we're gonna just do some programming and get it on the shelf in true asynchronous fashion. Is that the case there, Doug?
That sounds very fair. That's way nicer than what I was going to say.
Deferring to my senior colleagues, it's something that I'm really trying to get better at, so appreciate the opportunity to do so, bud. In terms of just speaking, for myself and my circumstances. Oh, Doug, did you mean to just turn off your camera there for a second, bud?
Did I? Didn't mean to. Sorry if it happened.
You don't need to be sorry. I was just like, oh, should we pause on account of impending glitches? But we seem to be in pretty good shape.
This is another thing for the paper. Another thing for the paper or the book.
We are living the format that we are talking about extemporaneously here, man. It's dope. I appreciate the dynamic of this. Yeah, totally, right? So I'm just going to say again that I'm really honored and grateful to be here in the unceded and ancestral home of the Secwepemc people here in Secwepemc Ulu, particularly in the Kamloops region where I reside. Again, it's an incredible privilege to be here, recognizing that I am an uninvited guest, and that again, hopefully I can carry myself in a way and sort of help, navigate my family and perhaps others around me, so that we can all be a bit more mindful and a bit more intentional about how we proceed, because there's a lot of knowledge out there. I've made a lot of reference to the Secwepemc People, Land and Laws book by the Ignatius, but there's other sources as well. I would just encourage anybody, wherever you are listening to this, that such books and such podcasts and such media are likely available. And just do yourself a solid. Not that it's my place to tell anybody to do anything. I don't mean to come across as preachy or moralizing at all. Anyway, Doug, just wanted to get that out there. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm here in the unceded traditional Mi'kmaq territory, and I'm loving it. We finally got a bit of snow, so it's not 18 or 19 anymore. It dipped down to 0, so life is pretty good.
Awesome. So snow. Are you a fan of winter generally here, Doug? Before we get into the show proper, just sort of as a warm-up question, because we are both Maritimers, and because you mentioned the weather, so clearly we have to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's the rule.
Yeah, just generally speaking, right? Like it's how it is, right? In terms of, are you a fan of the winter generally?
I'm a fan of weather as it's happening. Once the snow hits the ground and it becomes slush, not a fan. So as it happens, yeah, it's great.
So do you when it starts snowing, are you one of those people who intentionally then go outside? I kind of actually am in my own limited way. I don't do, skiing or outdoor sports as such, but just today it was snowing a bit. I had the opportunity to head on down to the Value Village for some tree decorations, and it was brisk. The snow was going on, and anyways, man, it's kind of all right, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't care what the weather is. I don't think there's bad weather. I think that there's people that aren't prepared for the weather. So I just wear my winter clothes, and I go out every day with my dogs for at least an hour. That is
at least an hour. Good for you.
Every day, at least an hour. I'm
going to give a shout out to at Dr. Doug Reed on Instagram, because there is some very good content, and every time you post, because you've got beautiful dogs. There's some, some of those video clips. I just red sand, red sand, red sand. You know, some of the coastal ones. I'm like, it just sort of sets my maritimer expat heart a pitter patter, you know, in its own way, right? So, at Dr. Doug Reed, that actually is your handle, is it not?
Yeah, that's it.
Good
It's on
stuff.
Instagram, yeah. And
Yeah,
on Twitter, but I'm rarely there anymore.
you should abandon Twitter, man, and then just say Elon Musk finally just made me mad enough. You can then be party to the exodus. Elton John left Twitter. Did you know that?
Yeah, yeah. Elon Musk begged him to stay, yeah.
If you're getting like Elton John mad at your platform, you're really doing something wrong with your thing. I would just say. So you can just say, I you know, because I melted my Twitter, you know, about in September-ish, I would say.
Yeah,
Coincided with the beginning of this, yeah, and now I get to say I was ahead of that thing, right? So.
And my philosophy is kind of like when you're going by a car accident on the highway, you slow down and watch. So I'm still there, and I poke my head in once in a while, but
to see, yeah, okay. Since we're talking about social media, and this is legit, okay.
Yep.
Everybody, I'm just going to throw it out there. This is a redo of episode 10 because, quite frankly, the quality control was off, and I'm going to sort of take ownership over my part of it. We're not going to dwell on it, but in terms of the redo here, I'm just going to say explicitly here then that we actually covered some pretty interesting ground, which I hope we're going to get into. And as much as I'd like to sort of burrow further, you know, to use a metaphor with the social media stuff, I'll just say one more thing. I'll just say one more thing because we are both about the retro stuff. Did you ever have a MySpace account?
Yes. Yeah, I did. I had to teach social media in a BED program. So that was one of the guest lectures I would come in to do in classes is here's what social media is and here's why it matters.
And that was one of the platforms that you spoke of, eh? Because the kids, you know, the young adults, whomever would have. I became aware of MySpace when it coincided with me becoming an educator. So I don't know if that's like some sort of foreshadowing of my life, but that was like when I moved to South Korea when my wife and I made a decision to move. She agreed to it, kind of a pattern in our life, actually, while we were married. But yeah, we went to her country. We went to South Korea, and the teachers there, the Western teachers, they were, you know, 25 and I was 28, 29. They were all just like, yeah, we got this thing that we all use. You got to get it. And then, you know, flash forward a few years and I'm on Twitter, right? When I was still using Twitter, and somebody I followed, I can't remember who, made the analogy like, yeah, if you go back to MySpace, it's like after a horror movie and all the, you know, everybody's been killed and you're just floating around there sort of seeing this redundant, dead kind of social environment. And I just wonder if like the end result of Musk, you know, taking that thing over and just sort of, so I get it. You're sort of keeping a sort of desk within the fire, you know, so to speak, like that dog in that meme that you shared that time, right? It's like,
that's it.
May as well just maintain it to see firsthand what the heck. Well, I'm glad I can rely on your experience in that regard because I don't ever plan to touch it again. So.
Yeah, no worries. I'll share whatever. And just for 2 seconds, the quality control thing you mentioned earlier, I think that's fantastic for us.
I think it is too.
I think we learned a lot. So it's good. We could.
Well, no, man, and again, just to extemporize a bit on the methodology here, because making the implicit explicit is kind of a notion I think that we both subscribe to as educators through technology generally. Is, you know, like in terms of how we build this show, I mean, I've sort of stopped speaking to the technical side of it in my notes simply because the process that we've settled on seems comfortable. But just to kind of re-up in case, you know, anybody is even remotely interested, you know, it sort of starts with a Google document. It actually starts with Facebook because we're pals on Facebook. and Doug will shoot me a link to what he's prepared for the topic and some notes and his citations and his cartoons. In a Facebook message, I'll click on it and I'll go, okay, this is what we are working on. And then I will do two things. What I'll start doing is prepping the WordPress environment, which is where, people go. So, that'll just be copying and pasting largely what Doug has prepared. But then it also means that I prep the slides that you see in the video version of this. So that gets me on a very serendipitous trip to Unsplash, where those images, those stock looking pictures go. Am I going too far off track here, bud? Or
no, I think this is awesome because one thing you've undersold is your notes that you put together. I love them. I think that it brings a nice, holistic, centered, grounded view to the podcast as well. So I really enjoy them, and I know they're different than mine. And I think that's synchronicity. I would say if we were actually teaching at a thing, it would be an example of good, co-teaching, right? And it actually, the two different approaches to the notes. That was something that I definitely saw as being valuable once I realized, that you were serious about it. And so with the other, the music podcast that we started, I won't beat it to death, but we use the same template, right? Dan sends me his stuff, and then I kind of riff off of that. So in terms of the tech specs, to steer it back to the technology again, if I may, have you checked out Unsplash at all, the repository, bud? Oh yeah, I've used it.
It's freaking awesome, right? Well, one thing that I noticed is that they've kind of got a slightly higher tier of pictures now, and you can have a Unsplash Plus. And I actually subscribed. Yeah, of course, right? And I'm like, on the one hand, it's like, how lame, right? But then on the other hand, I'm like, I'm going to be quasi-perfectionist enough to really want to use a specific image. I don't want to have to Mickey Mouse around with it. So I'm like, yep, $7 a month on my credit card, fine. So, now that we got our, technical stuff kind of down, except for obviously getting it on the wider platforms and stuff, which we're gonna, but it kind of gives room to think more about the narrative and the trajectory. So what you provide, it's like, oh, I get to look at the Unsplash pictures and then, place the slides together just so, and then run it through Camtasia, which makes my little educational technologist nerd heart kind of go a pitter patter, right? Because it's not technically challenging at all, and there's very, very little variation on the process. But every time, putting those notes in and putting, Camtasia together just so, it's the same, but it's different. And to me, that is just something which is kind of key to creativity and to the learning endeavor. I'm talking way too much here, dude. Is there anything that you want to get into right now? Or
one thing I want to say before we jump in, and your description has been fantastic to get to our topic today.
Cool. Thank you.
When you say, oh, it's not that difficult or whatever, it's like there's only 26 letters in the English language, and people use them to come up with some beautiful stuff. So,
well, that's cool, man. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's really kind of you. And like I said, I'm very happy with how this whole thing is going together, including the fact that it is a redo episode. So to jump now directly to the matter at hand, I love this title, and I'm going to let you speak to it at length here, dude, because I want to hear what you have to say. Is education a niche media subculture? Can I just say, awesome title, important topic, provocative intent there, bud. Please, what were you thinking, man? What was that all about?
Well, to be honest, you said it, so I assume your arm is really sore from patting yourself on the back for coming up with a great topic like that. That's well done. Good on you, man. Good on you.
And
but you said it in a previous one, and I could just feel the light bulb go on over my head and say, we got to talk about that. That was just put together so nicely. and it just like had instant ideas all over it.
Well, man, first of all, I'm flattered. That's really great because I'm having those similar kinds of, epiphanies or, brain surges or whatever. To me, it's just all different kinds of creativity. And I think
Yeah.
really I have, in my own, weird or off-center way, been pretty committed to a creative way of life. People go, that guy's kind of eccentric. I mean, I've been hearing that, and it's just like, fine, it is what it is. And everybody kind of rolls with this stuff. So I don't remember specifically saying that phrase, but I'm glad within the overall outputs of this show, I'm glad we're finding things that we can kind of latch onto and have some continuity. So again, like we said this before, right? Your notion of here of having, as far back as the initial episodes, like, let's have a thing about our definitions. Let's have a thing about metaphor. Let's, have a discussion amongst ourselves so we can be sort of on a common vernacular and a common approach. And where there are differences, and variations, speaking of that a bit, right? So again, full credit here to you coming up with a compelling and interesting series of topics here, dude, because that's a function of your synthesis, right? So
thanks.
Yeah, man, for sure.
So with this, when I started to dig in to the actual literature, I realized that
I'm grateful you dig into the literature. It saves me from having to do it. Okay. I mean, I throw some stuff in there, but when it comes to you fully formed, when you have a colleague like this, he's like, yeah, here's the main 4 references we need. Like, sweet, it's just like, I can add some stuff, but the basic shape of it is there. This is the kind of colleague that I am, which a lot of you probably may already know. That's the kind of colleague he is. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, do go on, man. Just props to you. Okay?
No worries.
So, yeah.
So as a subculture, right? Education doesn't produce consumers of media, right? Media is out there and they want it consumed, but education creates the literacy context to help learners learn how to use the media to create stuff. And that's what we're doing, right? Like, we built a podcast. You just shared a whole pile of stuff on, here's how we're building it. Here's what we're learning. And not everything we learn is wonderful, right? It's like, okay, I'm not going to do that thing again. Or I know I made the promise I was going to start sharing pictures and that hasn't happened yet. So we'll get there. But education is the literacy part for the creation, not just the consuming of the media. So that's where I got sucked into is the big literacy bit. And I know you're an English teacher, you're an English pedagogue, so literacy is right up your alley. I think that's a fair comment.
Well, Doug, I got to say, first of all, what you just said was a really thoughtful overview, and this is one of the through lines between the previous attempt at this, where I mean, you appealed to my English teacher thing, which is pretty strong with me, but more to the point, the notion of literacy with technology, the notion of having, the privilege to be literate in a certain ways, and where I attempted to go, Doug, last time with it, where I did sort of bring up the name Paulo Freire, right, a bit, only because. So we both agree that Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, as a lot of you will know, fantastic book, which I've read in a lot of summary form and such. I'm just like, I just feel like I've purchased worse things on Amazon. So I picked up that book on Amazon, and I'm going to add it to my to be read pile over there when it gets here, and I will place it prominently. And but I need a tangible book. That's just something for me. How do you feel about that, Doug? Are you kind of
I'm embarrassed to say that I have a PDF of the book, and I struggle with it because it's not a physical copy. Like I need something in both my hands. I have the PDF that I can scroll through.
It's a comforting tactile experience. Yeah, and I mean, for me, I mean, like I'm 44, but like my eyesight is starting to kind of like, and so I just picking it up and having a physical relationship with the object seems to be important to me. I don't know. So, and then I got one of his other books, like one of the last one, kind of a comp of other writings. So I'm just like, when we talk about literacy education, we're talking about a critical perspective. We're talking about then, enabling people to be able to participate and having that political thought and agency being perhaps predominant compared to just say static content knowledge and replication of certain subroutines, right? Is that it? So I just think like, and again, where I tried to go with it last time, which I didn't do a great job of doing, I'll just give a shout out to the folks, and I won't belabor this at all, Doug. I'll just say there is this sort of group of predominantly American academics doing they've got a series of books, publications, essays by some really cool people. It's a hybrid pedagogy. I think the URL is hybridpedagogy.org. Jesse Strommel, who is a really noted writer in the I guess critical technology space within American academics, is there, as well as some other people who I'm not going to try and recite them. But again, that critical perspective on technology, because those folks in this hybrid pedagogy, in their mission statement, they cite Paulo Freire a lot. And I'm like, I'm like, this is to your credit, dudes. This is to your credit, and non-dudes. Anyway, so when I'm sort of seeing these through lines that are important to me, you're talking about a subculture. I know you're sort of just kind of being like, well, that's a bit provocative, but in actual fact, it does, I think, the way you framed it, Doug, within your notes, speak to the political notion. All learning is political, and to pretend otherwise just is kind of silly. It's kind of a facile thing. So, and that leads us then to the tech discussion, I think, a bit. Doug, am I talking too much here? Am I rambling a bit too much about it?
No. It makes sense where you're headed, because my first reference was the UNESCO reference.
Yes.
Literacy and empowerment of one's health, one's income, and one's relationship with the world.
Can you speak to more about why that was your? Can you speak to why that was your first reference? And I will not replicate the whole. This is where I found the screenshot of this and that. There's some really good resources and notes which Doug has steered me towards. Which So can you just talk about the UNESCO stuff a little bit more, dude?
Yeah, it matters. Right? A whole pile of people around the world said, this matters. This is how people help their lives get better. And that's been my whole life. Right? I am definitely not rich. I'm sure I kind of could have went into another profession and made piles of cash, because I don't have the social skills to suck up. So I have to use my actual knowledge and brain and abilities to do that. But this is where I come from. Right? It's social and human development, the ability to transform lives. This speaks to me, that UNESCO quote. It just matters so much. And that's why I put it first.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And I'll just say,
social and human development.
As I was sort of just chasing down references for this, just because, for my own interest, because it seemed cool, it sort of led me actually. I'll just say UNESCO, in terms of the ed tech stuff, have adopted MOOCs as sort of a model, a distributed, asynchronously delivered, predominantly model for the developing world, right? Particularly, and I've been to some conferences, but where there were people there who were talking about, like they're using this to share farming practices and whatnot. you know, amongst the population who the way they would participate is probably with their phone. Like, you know, they scale the delivery down to the most basic set of tools, which again I think is sort of something that you and I have been advocating for. I mean, I know it comes across as being facetious or jokey, and a lot of the times it kind of is, but I think you and me are kind of gotten to the point where we're sort of on a similar wavelength in terms of really less is more, and it's almost like I think it's almost like if you can't justify why you're doing the more, then maybe you need to step it back to the point that you can. You know what I mean, Doug?
I do. And another piece of the MOOCs that I love so much is so many of them are free. And that's the financial aspect is such a huge thing, right? Some people don't have $20 American or 20 Canadian to take this learning opportunity. So it needs to be free. It costs enough for them to get the access to it just through their phone or whoever has the computer in town or whatever, right? So it's how do we reduce the barriers to get there? And we don't want just consumers. We want creators. That's what makes the difference.
Are you sure we don't just want consumers?
I don't.
I'm putting my admin hat on. I'm like, the minister in charge of public universities is like, you know, we got these sunk costs, and then I'm being totally facetious, dude. Obviously.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Okay. So again, Doug, just to kind of like to keep things going here, there were some terms that you've put here in the notes, and one of your citations.
Dynamic literacies was my favorite.
Man.
The dynamic literacies by Potter and McDougall. I just loved it.
That's the term I was going to. That's what I was going for there. And again, just. I love the possibility, and I love the just sort of inherent, almost learner-centeredness of that. Doug, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, look at what literacy was like when I was growing up. Literacy was could you read, right? Like that was literacy, and it wasn't even could you read and understand. It was could you read, and so now it's more than that. It's like information literacy. It's can you read it, figure out where it came from, figure out if is there a value to the information, and that's part of the dynamic and the meaning making that has come along with digital media in our culture, right? It's the meaning making is a word that I just love because the Google Doc has it underlined because it's all one word and they want to split it, and it's like nope, that's one word. And
academia is great for just sort of like, well, now it's just a new word, and the software will disagree. I agree, man. You know,
and every word was made up at one point. So let's make up some more, right? Because that's a good one.
That is a good one. We've, you know, so. I don't know, man. I think as we go further with this, we're going to actually be coming up with sort of maybe an emergent concept, which sort of, you know, can actually be possibly one of the educational outputs of this thing, which it's a multifaceted effort. So, you know, we're gonna start honing in on. We're gonna start cherry picking certain terms. We're gonna start cherry picking, and then it's almost like. Well, okay, so we got this term, and we got these sort of conceptual models and Venn diagrams that we like. I have not contributed any Venn diagrams yet, ironically, because
you have, but you haven't done the diagram. Your words are doing that. You just haven't drawn circles yet, but you absolutely have.
I got the verbal itis, my friend. I appreciate that.
I can see it in my head. I can see the Venn diagrams you're talking about in my head as you say them. So
well, it's all about making the again. I'm saying it because I believe it, even though it's a bit of a cliche, a bit of a constructivist cliche. But again, you know, making the implicit explicit, Yeah, man, everything you said about like how, I mean, really, from my kids' perspective, right? I'm gonna just shout out my kids, Ethan and Kai, who are
Yeah.
upstairs. Their online stuff is a pretty core component of their self-identity, right? I'm not going to deny that. I'm like Gen X. I'm like late Gen X, where I'm still like, yeah, Facebook, social media, whatever. I can take it or leave it. It's important to me. But if like you just chopped it all off, I'd just be like, fine. My kids, I don't know. They've been not only growing up using it recreationally, but they've experienced it through the use of Google tools and stuff in the K to 12 that they have here, and it's just so now part of their notion of how to interact in the world functionally involves logging into things, passwords, interfaces of certain technology, their phone, laptop, and it's just functional passing knowledge for them, which we, you and I, people of our vintage, we may have it now at that level, but it was not, ubiquitous. It was not, just part of the friggin' environment from the moment we could think of ourselves. From the moment these kids have had self-awareness, it's been mediated by technology far more than any generation ever in the history of human existence, right? I'm sorry to go off on a tangent there, dude.
No. I just added a yet at the end because I don't see it changing. I would like to be a bit more analog because I love that link you sent the other day, but I don't think it's going to happen, right? Because if you look at the history, and one of these days we're going to do a history one, but it's with radio that changed how literacy worked, and then silent films, and then the talkies, then television, then the internet, and then social media. We have had to adjust what we consider literacy every time a new medium has come in. And it's like taking a big rock and throwing it into a frozen pond, right? And bloosh, everything changes.
That is a dope metaphor, bud. Love it.
Yeah, so the Sefton Green article was fantastic for that as well, because they also talked about youth, technology, and media cultures. So thanks for reading that article too. So we were right on the same page.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's just like once you get past the notion that you're not just looking at FTEs in your post-secondary, once you get past the notion that they're just not like, they're clicking into a new set of resource distribution vis-a-vis, the public purse. Once you get past that, you go, well, yeah, there's not necessarily that much difference cognitively between somebody who's saying a mature 11 or grade 11 or 12 compared to, say, somebody who's average or maybe a bit less average in first. It's like it's not that discrete, right? So I like the K to 16 framing. Do you think that's clever at all? Do you think of that before?
I haven't read enough about that, but I would love your thoughts on it.
I've expressed them, so I'm like, maybe Doug knows something. I was sort of trying to, but no, man,
we lose so many of the kids that don't go on.
We could be doing so much
education.
We could be doing so much more to bring integration and such between the two, and keeping them less discreet. Okay, man.
That's right.
So in terms of the subculture tip, again, I just kind of have to keep like my indie rock brain, my counterculture brain, my punk rock thing, just kind of clicks with its antennas up here. You kind of provoke that notion a bit. So I guess like subculture, like have you felt yourself within a subculture as per education, and could you delineate what that experience may have been like a bit, sir?
Yeah. For me, I've
Yep.
always been an outsider. Always.
That's
And,
why you and I think, have a pretty good dynamic. And I'm sorry to keep barging in, man, but
it's okay. It's okay.
I have felt within that standpoint myself. I'm always lucky to have kind people in my life who, are there for support. But, as far as like, people have told me like, man, you're weird and antisocial. I don't know, man. So you're an outsider. Two outsiders doing a show.
Yeah.
Carry on, dude.
So for me,
Yep.
I always want to be part. Like I grew up playing all the sports. So being part of a team mattered, like being part of a group with one goal mattered. And the way I see like education, the subculture, what's slow right now is with social media and the creation, there's a participatory component to it that some schools are slow to deal with, right? It's like you got some educators that have had tenure for 35, 40, 45 years, and they're stand and deliver, and the young ones coming up are saying, no, I'm taking control of my learning. It has to be participatory. It has to be creative. And that includes like some transmedia navigation across all the different technologies to figure out how do I put all these pieces together. And that's not happening in a lot of ways.
Navigation, man, that's my next tattoo. I'm getting that like heavy metal letters, man. Sorry. Okay, we got dynamic we got dynamic literacy, and we got transmedia navigation, dude. That in itself is friggin' gold right there. Please continue.
Thanks.
I wanted to.
No, that was. I would love to take credit for that one, but that's the Jenkins article that you'll have up in the show notes, right?
Exactly. There we go. So, like when we're putting together, the nonfiction book version of these notes and such. Attention, academic book publishers. FYI. Then these are some things that we can cherry pick, from when we're sort of speaking to our emergent yet hopefully highly practical approach here, such as we can. Because again, sorry, Doug, you look like you're about to say something, dude.
Yeah, no, I was going to jump off what you said there.
Please do.
Right, like what you were just saying, it just reminded me of an article that I read from some business journal, and it was about take a look at the whatever, like if you look at Wall Street, the American financial stock market thing, and here are the Wall Street 200 or 100 or 500, whatever that number is, of these are the biggest.
Oh yeah, Fortune 500, yeah.
Thank you, Fortune. I couldn't remember the word Fortune. The Fortune 500.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, those guys are all big right now, those organizations. But if you go back to 50 years, there's like 4 of them left. So where did the other 46 go? And that's what's going on with education. Education, we don't just wipe out schools, right? It's like, no, it doesn't work. Too bad. See you later. It's like they have to change and adapt. And some of the schools just are slow getting there for a number of reasons that I think we've talked about in other episodes and stuff. But that's a struggle that we have to do, and struggle we got to deal with, because this change isn't stopping, and change is inevitable. Suffering is optional, and this is how we have to get there.
Dude,
and part of that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
No, please. I was going to throw in a reference to the Stoic literature, which
please do. I like the Stoics.
Only to point out that what you expressed to me, like just what you just put out there right now. Suffering is Say it again, please. Suffering's
optional, right? Change is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
That strikes me as like Marcus Aurelius kind of.
Yes.
But because it's $10 cheaper, I downloaded it onto the Kindle over there.
The Kindle,
So,
yeah.
speaking of resources, speaking of literacies,
Going back to the Stoics for 2 seconds.
please
The
do.
Art of Manliness podcast has a bunch of episodes on the Stoics, and they are worth listening to. They are so good.
Is that a good title for a podcast, man? The Art of Manliness? Is that what it is?
That's where they started.
Okay.
That's where they started.
Okay.
They've got heaps of episodes. Like they got a couple of thousand episodes now. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
where they started. And it
That's
was
cool.
about being the best person you can be. And it's very American.
Okay.
It's
That's
very
fine.
American. But
Okay, but no, man, that's awesome. Yeah, you sent me the Reddit thing for
Yeah.
the podcast, which I haven't looked at. I gotta be, I think, probably more omnivorous, I think, about the podcast deal, because I know that there's good stuff out there.
Yeah.
Speaking of literacy, again, probably just from these various trigger points that what we've been talking about basically since Friday when we did the first version of this. Given the significance of this topic, man, I'm kind of glad we had the opportunity to speak to this kind of a second time, because
oh yeah.
there's still some weight from what we talked about before. But I think maybe we're kind of benefiting from having thought about it a couple more days too, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I know I did. Because I know I
Yeah.
listened to some of your stuff and say, holy crap, I love that stuff. Let's talk about that. And that's one of the reasons why I left the UNESCO. I didn't give the whole reference for the UNESCO just because I knew it would bend your noodle.
That was a friggin' I was like, if he's doing this intentionally, then well done. And if he's not doing it intentionally, and I'm just following up, fulfilling, like in my world, I'm a junior colleague, and I, will you kind of, the senior guy, left something blank, you just kind of, you fill it out, right? It's the collaborative nature of the endeavor. And I was just really, I think, grateful to end up going down the series of rabbit holes that I did, leading to the Incheon Convention on literacy, which, I'm not even going to throw in any of the personal stuff that I totally could about it, but there's some really good stuff in that document, just in and of itself, from, skimming it, right? And so, again, speaking of literacy, as we're kind of maybe on the downward slope, I just want to give out one more shout out here to Martin Weller's book, Metaphors in Ed Tech, because, Doug, you've been kind of talking a bit before and after the show sometimes about the sort of additional benefits of doing this show. For me, those additional benefits including adding to my reading and giving structure to my reading. And I've sort of given myself the task of finishing Weller's book in its entirety before the December 31st, right? So,
Read-cember? Is that what you're calling it? Read-cember? That's awesome. That's awesome, man.
I was like, you want to talk about having like a mini epiphany or whatever. It's like, I'm an English teacher. I've been unemployed for a while. My dad's been doing stuff for years, literally decades, actually, with NGOs in New Brunswick about, literacy, Born to Read. That's kind of an initiative that he's been associated with. In addition to his other, work as a government guy. It's just, and again, like last time I was kind of maybe more, silly about it, but it just, you start talking about what is something that can make people's lives better, and if they don't have it, they're at the worst disadvantage in the world, right? It's literacy in all of its permutations, in all of its glory. So if you look at education as a type of literacy, and that to me, Doug, is why, that's what you put to me. That's what I read in those notes. Education is at root a type of literacy, and literacy is not politically neutral. So that is important. I think that we've uncovered that a bit, with the way that you framed the topic here, Doug. So again, shout out to that, man. Well done.
Thanks.
Yeah, totally.
Now, if I can jump back 2 minutes,
please do.
The characterization I have of our relationship is I'm not senior. I think you're a friend and a colleague, and I can learn from you. So I might be older, but not.
You are the okay. You are gainfully employed in public education, where and I'll just because we're at the end, right, Doug? We kind of we kind of okay. So before arbitrarily saying we're at the end, I think we've opened up a lot here. I think we have more through lines for further inquiry and discussion, particularly on some of these terms that we've sort of highlighted, that you've highlighted, and particularly with this notion of, education as culture, and culture is, as we know, not equally supported in terms of resources, in terms of agency, and the experience of, say, Indigenous community members living in, say, Northern Ontario, in a community where there's boil-only water, all the time. What's that, look like? The neoliberal myth of just we're all equal, just give everybody a chance, that's something that I hope we're running counter to on this show a bit, if I can, Doug.
It's like that other meme that's going around. We're not in the same boat. We're in the same storm, but some of us have big, comfortable boats. Some of us have rafts. Some of us have a couple of pieces of wood we're holding on to, or if it's like Jack at the end of Titanic, he can't even get onto that little piece of whatever that Rose is on, right? It's not the same. And we're trying to suit everybody and help everybody get there. And that's where some of the pictures that I included, it's like I got a picture, like the very first picture ever taken, and it's like, how would we use that? It didn't even exist before. How is a teacher going to help use this? Right? It's that kind of stuff. It's putting a context to the culture to try to help people move forward in their life. That's the some culture that's different than the rest of society.
Man, when we put it like this, I actually, it's all I can do not to get all self-congratulatory, man. But okay, so in terms of winding down, first of all, man, thanks. No, man, it's just like I always want to close on a high note, and I can't think of a better way to go out than what you just did. So I'm just like, okay, then, But do you have anything else, Bud, here that you want to sort of convey before we do so?
I'm leaving on a high, so have a great night.
Yeah,
and we'll talk later next week.
Yeah, that's dope. Thank you. Shout out to my new consulting venture, 506 Consulting Limited, established 2022. This episode was made with 506. And again, this is like an intangible benefit here of my friendship with this man, because he talked about on one of these episodes a consulting venture, which he what years do you want to tag on that there, Bud?
Oh, I don't know.
2000 blah blah blah. Okay, 2000 blah blah blah. Well,
yeah,
2000 blah 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 is my 2022. And anyways, like I said, I just am grateful to be able to do this every week. And yeah, we're going to have next one Thursday, Friday-ish coming at you there.
Yeah,
so,
something like that. And before anybody goes, once you finish listening to this, go listen to Today New Brunswick, Tomorrow the World, because I don't know anything about that topic, and it was fascinating to me. I really enjoyed listening to it, so go listen. It's worth it.
I seriously appreciate that, dude. And shout out to my awesome other colleague on the East Coast, Dan Hayward, for participating in that venture. Again, I'm applying, hopefully, some of the better stuff that we've learned from this experience here. and kind of put it over there and recontextualized it. I just hope that everybody out there is, you know, whatever you're doing that involves what we are up to, we both appreciate it a lot. Seriously, much respect to everybody involved. So thanks a lot. Take care, and we'll see you sooner than later. Okay, everybody? Bye.
Have a good time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.